Hello friends of YouTube, welcome back to Mike Reads the World. Today we're discussing Hamid Ismailov's The Railway. And Hamid Ismailov was actually born in Kyrgyzstan, but because I already have another book or two that could also count for Kyrgyzstan, I'm going to be counting him for Uzbekistan, which I don't have anybody else for. And he did live in Uzbekistan for a considerable amount of time before being forced to leave. So this book is actually, I can't really say I've finished it. Like, I read it, but I'm gonna just be honest that I did not understand like 90% of this book. And there's a couple reasons for that. That's not to say that I think it's bad or it's negative. Just that one, I would not recommend this as the first book to read for the region of Central Asia. In fact, I think the more that you can read from Central Asia before reading this book, the better off you're going to be. And part of that is, I think, what the book is trying to show. The name of the book itself, The Railway, is talking about this town, Gilas, in part of the ancient Silk Route, right? But there's also a railway going through it during the time of the Soviet Union, and a good part of the book takes place during the Soviet Union era of Uzbekistan. Now, the major problem with understanding this book is there are so many characters. This is not an exaggeration. I don't think I've ever read a book with more named characters than this one. This is the okay, it's a 275 pages of this is the book. And then you have no less than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of character names, which is like 160 characters. Or is it 134? I don't know. But you practically have two pages of book per character, which is insane. So in my mind, I think in a lot of my favorite novels, there are about between 5 and 10 really memorable characters. And in this book, there's a few that stand out, but this book just jumps around so much and just tries to do, I think, too much. This is a personal opinion. Unless it's that the book is trying to show something about that it's not the individuality of these characters that's important, because you can't get a sense of anybody's individuality, and most characters essentially have to be defined simply by their ethnic or religious or origin, or their role in society. So it's a book that's supposed to be made up of caricatures, I think. All of this is speculative because, like I said, this video is not, if you haven't figured this out by now, for somebody who wants to understand this book on a deeper level. This is a chronicle of my experience trying to read it as part of this Reading the World series. And if you're trying to read the world, maybe you can watch this video and decide if it's something that you want to put the time into, because you're going to have to put time into this book, a lot of time. And I just really wasn't willing to do that. I mean, there's 150 some characters, there's 150 footnotes, there's and who wants to keep, I don't like flipping to the back of the book to read all these footnotes, and I don't like that to be a required part of the reading experience, or to keep flipping to the back of the book to remember which character is who, when we may not even see them again. I mean, it's like you don't know if a character is important. Even the important characters, some of them don't get a lot of book time. So it's just, yeah, just very difficult, very frustrating. That being said, I did learn about Central Asia from this, and it's one of those things where it's like you learn how much you don't know, right? Because this Central Asia, this Uzbekistan area and the railway is this confluence of like cultures and religions. Not even really a confluence, because it's not like people are trying to come here, right? It's not really a hub. It's just a place that like people are passing through, and some people end up staying by accident, and you just get this really strange mix, eclectic mix of peoples from all parts of the world. You get Koreans and Southeast Asians. You get people that have left and gone to Europe and fought in the war. You get people from the Soviet Union bureaucracies. There's a couple sections in the books that are very mystical, religious oriented, and you get sort of this surrealist dream sequence type of thing, or visions, like religious visions. So I don't know if I want to take it to the point of using that term I love so much, magical realism. But I prefer not to look at it as any kind of magical. And even this quote on the front: imagine Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude on the empty plains of Central Asia, bold and inventive. I prefer not to compare books to 100 Years of Solitude, even though so many do it and so many are influenced by it, because if I go into a book with that in my head, I'm not going to be able to get 100 Years of Solitude out of my head, and there's just way too many like pale imitations of 100 Years of Solitude. And 100 Years of Solitude, while good, is also an imitation in some ways of a lot of many works before it. Not imitation, but it certainly takes big parts of it from things that were already going on in South American and Latin American literature. So I went on a bit of a tangent there, but yeah, you're going to have to put work into this book if you're going to get something out of it, because outside of a few lectures on YouTube by the author himself, there's really not much out there that can give you a deeper look of what he was trying to do, or what the vision of was for this. And even personally, even listening to the author talk about this book, it still didn't really help me understand it much better, except kind of get that big picture, which I was already seeing, of it being a passing through point, that Silk Road idea, or this kind of point where a lot of different cultures and ideas and religions mix. And so what you get is a place that at the end of the book feels like I got a sense of what it's like, but it wasn't an entertaining thing to read. It was a very frustrating and kind of like, wow, I just, perplexing thing to read. And maybe it's a book I'll go back to. There's a lot of references to like the Persian Book of Kings, the Quran. There's references to the Epic of Manas, I think it's called, the big Kyrgyz epic, which I do plan to read eventually. And so there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of references in here I think I just don't get because I'm not familiar with the culture of these areas. And it feels like a book that has a very difficult, it's very difficult, I think, for a quote unquote, I hate doing the air quotes thing, Westerner to enter into. It's there's a phrase for that, right? It's a high barrier of entry. It's not an easy one to get into if you're not already familiar with this region and the cultures and things like that. That took way too long to say. So, that being said, there were moments when I could start enjoying it that felt like standalone short stories, but it just kept jumping around so much, and I got the feeling I got the feeling that there were like all these, stringboard connections that somebody could make in this novel between the sections, like that the author, I got the sense, the author gave me the sense that he was weaving this truly intricate, intelligent tapestry all over the place, but I just didn't have the will or the patience right now, or the interest, the particular interest in this region, that I wanted to stay with this book for a long period of time. And part of it is I just couldn't really care about any character because of the obvious reasons I've mentioned, and that's important to me. I think you just have to be like, you have to be the right kind of person looking for a book about this region. I think with like, you really want to immerse yourself in like the bigger sociological and political issues of this region, because I don't think you're really able to get attached to any of the characters, even if you are, uh, say, interested in the topics of this book. That's my personal opinion. So, very difficult book, very unique experience for a book. I mean, I can't think of any book ever that I've read that has this many characters. Even especially at the 260 page mark, having like, half as many characters as pages. That's insane to me. How did he even do that? Like, I mean, it's kind of admirable, but at the same time, like, did not make it a good read for me. And maybe that was, and I'm sure that wasn't his priority, was making this a good read for Westerners. But, I'm sure people who say are from different cultures might look at books that I really love, like The Magic Mountain. I just read The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann and really loved it. Um, One moment. But the thing is, like, I'm sure there's people from other cultures that would read that and just not understand any of the references. They wouldn't, maybe they think there's too many characters. Like, when you mention an Italian, a Westerner, even like me from the United States, has an idea in their head of what an Italian is. And, or in this book and in this time period, like Settembrini, and they might say, okay, yeah, I can connect to that, and has some ideas of what they are, and what they stand for, and whatever, some idea, right? But for me, it's like when I hear one of the many, tribe names or names of different groups, or like I mean, I don't even know what example to use, but like, sometimes names themselves can tell you something about the character, but to understand that, you have to know something about the religion, or the language. You have to know about the language. So to get a sense of like what this character's name is communicating, right? So that's a challenge in translation, when instead of translating names literally, you translate them as the original name. So there might be something like that going on. I'm just speculating and thinking about like how it's kind of just it. Part of it is a difficulty in not knowing the context of a lot of the cultural references, and maybe it's just my cultural bias that makes it so difficult to get in this book. But personally, I think 160 characters or whatever it is, it's around there, for a 260, 70 page book is too much. Simply too much. Named characters, right? So yeah. It does, in the beginning of the book, you do get a little family tree. It's one of those that gives you a family tree to start the book, so you can try to follow that and figure it out. There's parts of the book in italics that are narrated by a boy who is the center of this family tree, so you get the sense that he's important, but I never figured out why he's important. I could never connect all the dots, and to be honest, I really read the last 40 pages not very carefully because I just knew I was not understanding this book. And even though like I physically read the words, I wasn't understanding it, and there were only a few parts that I could actually get into it. So with that, I'm going to stop there. The next book that I'll be doing a video on will be Blanca Olmedo from or by Lucila Gamero de Medina de Honduras. And this book, I believe, is only available in Spanish. So that is something to keep in mind for next video. It'll be an interesting review because, yeah, I think this might be the only book that I review that you can only find in Spanish. But I will say right away, this is a great book actually to learn Spanish with. It's kind of a little bit more of like a superficial romance novel, but I am finding it entertaining, and it's from 1908. So it's a very interesting look into kind of a woman's perspective from Honduras in 1908, in Central America. It's a perspective you don't often find easily in literature. So I actually think this is a great book to look into if you just want to learn Spanish and read a story that's a little bit more straightforward. If you are learning, like, I still recommend having a base level of Spanish before trying to read this in Spanish, but like this is a great one to, I think, go from like beginner intermediate to getting a more advanced Spanish where you can read full novels. So it'll be a unique entry in this Reading the World series for that reason. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. A little bit shorter today because I simply just had a really hard time with the railway and may go back to it someday. And like I said, though I finished it, I didn't really finish it and I didn't really understand it. And it's the first book I can, like, actually, I really think I say that about, that I don't feel like I truly finished it. But as I said, I'm not going to force myself to finish books in this project or to necessarily understand them. I will read them all the way through, skim the last 40, 50 pages, like in the case of this one if I have to, just realizing I'm not getting it. And keep going because I want to keep reading the world, and I simply don't want to slow down for books that I'm not enjoying, if that makes sense. And some books take a little bit of work to enjoy, but I felt like the work this book was asking of me was not worth the payoff for me. So it's as simple as that. I do think there's plenty of people that could get a ton out of this book, and it's probably a great work of literature. I'm just an average Mike giving my opinion. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.